Welcome to Beyond Work, a series by Forbes DACH where we unpack all the major shifts going on in our work lives. My name is Olivia Chang, and in this show, I'll be talking to all the business leaders and entrepreneurs who are driving this movement. Today on the program, we are joined by Bettina Schaller, who's the president of the World Employment Confederation. You have been trying to figure out the future of work long before the crisis. So just give us an idea, what would you say is your criteria for a healthy and well-functioning labor market?
For us, labor markets must ensure access to work to everybody. Everybody. And that sounds so obvious, but unfortunately, Olivia, it's not the case in many, many countries around the world. And it's not the case notably because of rigidities in the labor market. You can start with just, very harsh dismissal practices, making it impossible for new entrants or different people to access the labor market. So coming back to what would a good labor market look like, it will be no surprise, but to us, a flexibility that again allows access and then that allows shifts in that labor market is actually a good thing. But what we've experienced over the last years and what we've seen is that there's one other element that is key for a labor market, and that is that it allows for what we call diverse forms of work. So different contracts that people may take, looking at either their life situation or just at their preferences. What I'm trying to say here is that not everybody is or wants to be in what we call open direct employment relationship. Not even everybody wants to be employed. We know that, the gig economy is a big word, self-employed, of course. More and more people are looking for different ways to work and are looking for other ways to make a living. And a labor market needs to be able to cater for all these ways of working, those diverse forms of work, notably as well by, recognizing them all in the same way, and then giving all of them the elements of security, the safety nets, and this is something we've seen in the crisis heavily, that are required.
So give us a scorecard here then. How are the European job markets holding up during the crisis?
Look, European job markets have actually through and through tried their best, notably by looking at keeping people in employment. And for that, we've seen unprecedented measures being taken by governments across the EU when it came to economic support measures. The one instrument that we've seen used as never before is actually short-time work, or Kurzarbeit, as we know it in, the German-speaking countries, of course, Germany, Switzerland, Austria. And this instrument has been applied also by many other countries across Europe, actually to the extent where in April, early May, over 50 million workers across Europe were actually falling back on that instrument, either obviously with companies requesting it. This is something that had never happened before. So it has allowed actually for employment in many cases to remain stable, if we can say so. Overall, actually, the answer would have to be a differentiated one, because we'd have to look at the sectors in a labor market. And what we see there is that across Europe, the two sectors that have been struggling the most, everybody knows it, everybody's talking about it, are first of all, what we call the HoReCa sector, so hotelry, restaurants and catering, the whole gastro sector, and then of course tourism. And now in many countries in Europe, those are absolute key for the economy. Looking at France, looking at Spain, looking at Italy, but also at Greece, for example. So very, very heavily impacted there. But then of course there's other sectors that are actually struggling to find people. starting with the healthcare sector, but then of course e-commerce as well. So the answer actually would have to be differentiated. Again, Europe has been doing what they could to a certain extent, introducing measures that we've never seen before to really make sure that people stay in employment.
Let's take a more common scenario then to break it down even further. We have someone who is in their 20s. They've just been laid off from their job, possibly tourism or retail, as you mentioned. What support or what help needs to be there to get them back onto their feet?
Now, I must say, the outlook for young people, unfortunately, is worrying. This is something that we're looking at. And people who are either still in training or in education, and who depend on workplaces for work readiness programs, may encounter some difficulties. Having said that, I was absolutely encouraged by the news in Switzerland around 10 days ago, which showed that actually Swiss companies are hiring and are using the instrument of, again, bringing young people into the labor market via apprenticeship. So this was a fantastic development in Switzerland. Now, we've been looking at Germany as well, and we've been looking at Austria as well. We know in Germany that actually short-time work was linked as well to the necessity to upskill and reskill, and has a piece aimed at young people as well. So we have here actually two governments or three countries that are very heavily looking at young people and making sure that they will have the chances, at least when it comes to the time of still, training and getting their certifications. Now, the labor market itself is of course a different picture, because currently companies are actually not hiring. There's a hiring freeze. And we're not quite sure. Obviously, we were hoping this would look better now by the end of the year. It looks like it's going to go into early next year, even Q2 probably. But that's something we're keeping an eye on. And here, all we can do is continue to just encourage companies, remind them about the innovation that young people bring into companies as well, and just fall back on the culture that we luckily have in exactly those three countries to onboard young people and bring them on.
It's estimated that millions of jobs potentially could be displaced from the current pandemic, but would you say that a large majority of them were going to be displaced anyway from automation?
Well, that's a very interesting question. So, I mean, displacement is actually about an involuntary job loss, right? So there, if we now go back to those measures I just mentioned, governments have actually tried to avoid that, at least in those countries where obviously it was applied. Probably your question is of high importance in the United States, for instance, because there, of course, 20 million people were displaced, so lost their jobs between April and May. Slowly they're coming back. Now 9 million have come back into the labor market. So to your question about technology, the World Economic Forum just recently published their jobs reset report, which also again looked at economy, and there's many other statistics. Now, we're part of those who believe that indeed technology will make a big amount of jobs obsolete, but it will create more jobs in the long run, if not already today. And actually, we see this already, again, if we pick up the healthcare sector, the amount of jobs linked to tech healthcare, where we don't have the specialists, we don't have the experts because there's not enough skilled people around, by far outweighs well, not by far, but let's say is promising enough now to say there are jobs out there. So for us, technology indeed, it's been around. It's something that has started to heavily impact labor markets before this crisis hit. This crisis has accelerated that as well. And that's something that will stay in what I call a with COVID world. I don't talk about a post-COVID, but I say a with COVID world. So for all of us, it's clear digital skills are an absolute necessity, and anything linked to technology in any sector is actually going to create jobs.
Now, the labour markets here are extremely diverse from country to country. Some are mega cities, some are led more by high tech and manufacturing. Who do you think out there is more well positioned to see a better recovery?
Look, in Europe, it's those areas, and I'm very glad that you pick up the fact, again, we have to look at it in a differentiated way. Not country by country, but it's those areas and very likely cities that could be that are able to build that ecosystem between where well, employers are. That might sound logical, but these days it's also very much about, in a way, lifestyle, and it's something that the LinkedIn economic graph data actually shows very well, how we're starting to see clusters, areas building where people gather very often with the same skill set, and they gather there also because it's just a nice area to live and it meets the requirements that they want for their lifestyle. I think it's going to be very interesting now as we shift out of the pandemic, but keep certain habits of working in this hybrid work, how this is going to as well, shift the importance of certain well, industrial areas, I guess, that we know today that are just not going to be populated anymore for the benefit of other cities. So now, I guess you wanted more precision on your side. I must say, big capitals like Paris, Madrid, London are still very sought after. Having said that, we've actually seen an exodus to the countryside. So it's going to be, again, interesting to see whether there's going to be, your little rural villages that all of a sudden are going to pick up outside of these mega cities. We've seen an increase of purchase of holiday homes in the mountains, be it in Switzerland and Austria as well. So look, it's countries that are going to have that, again, infrastructure in terms of offices, in terms of lifestyle. And then the last thing maybe is, which is going to be important and life-changing, is just the connectivity. So the connectivity infrastructure of a country, which I think brings the whole discussion around 5G and broadbands right up on the agenda of many countries, because it doesn't help if you sit in your beautiful chalet back in the Swiss or Austrian mountains, but your internet access doesn't work. So these are all elements we're going to be looking at with great interest now in the coming months and years.
Bettina, after so many years in this field of the future of work, how are you taking all the knowledge and advice that you have gained and actually applying it to your own personal life?
Well, what a big question. I must say that and the crisis has shown it. Actually, caring about people is just becoming more and more important. We have seen how employers actually, and I've been talking to a lot of colleagues in many companies of all sizes, but how it's been important for everybody to connect with their own people and to make sure, that everybody's coping in their very own individual way with the current situation. And that was the case as much for all of those who, in a way, were lucky enough still to continue working, but to bring it back to me. So for me as well, it's been over the years, and even more now, about caring, about making sure that this, all my network, all my the people that I luckily get to interact with, that they're actually, fine and well. And then, Olivia, I must admit, it's also been about self-care. Over the years, and the more you also actually grow responsible for certain people, it's important that you yourself are well. And if we again bring it back to the pandemic, admittedly, I was struggling a little bit a few weeks ago. I found it quite overwhelming, all of this, and so I actually I've just come out of a few days of just, making a deliberate break and saying, okay, I need to just come back to myself and make sure that I'm resilient so that we all can be.
Well, Bettina, thank you so much for breaking this all down for us. It's a giant topic to tackle, but I'm sure we will get through this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the interest, and all the best to you with this series, Olivia.